From strangers sharing the same birth and death dates to unexplainable phenomena in outer space, weird coincidences happen more often than you think. While most coincidences are not documented and end up being forgotten, here are 15 unexpected events, predictions, and cases of sheer luck that have gone down in history as the top strangest coincidences. Number 15. Same birth and death dates. To kick off this list is the strange birth and death of the intelligent Stephen Hawking. As the world still mourns his death in 2018, people are finding comfort in some unusual connections between Hawking and other historical scientists. Hawking was born on January 8, 1942, a date that marks 300 years since the death of Galileo Galilei, another pioneering scientist. This coincidence has long been noted, but a new connection has come to light following Hawking's death. Hawking passed away on March 14, 2018, at his home in Cambridge, England. This date happens to be the birthday of Albert Einstein, another highly respected scientist who was born on March 14, 1879. Oh, there's more. March 14th is a special day for math enthusiasts, known as Pi Day, because of its numerical coincidence with the first 3 digits of pi, which is 3.14. While it may seem like doing too much by associating Stephen Hawking with a light-hearted celebration like Pi Day, you should know that Hawking himself had a playful sense of humor. Connecting Hawking to a day that celebrates math is actually a fitting tribute. Remembering Hawking on Pi Day is not meant to take the world's attention away from his commendable contributions to science and our understanding of the universe. Rather, it's a way to honor his legacy. If you think the connection involving Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein, and Galileo Galilei is strange, wait until you hear the next one. Number 14. Miss Unsinkable. Some might call Violet Jessup extremely lucky for her 3 historic survivals, while others might see her as unfortunate to have faced so many dangerous situations, and you're about to find out why. Violet Jessup was born in Argentina to Irish parents who later moved to Britain. She attended a convent school, but her education was cut short when her mother, a ship stewardess, fell ill. To support her family, Jessup followed in her mother's footsteps and became a stewardess at the age of 21. She started working on the Royal Mail Line and later switched to the White Star Line. The White Star Line was in a difficult competition with Cunard to dominate the transatlantic passenger market. To gain an edge, White Star launched 3 massive luxury ships, which were the Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic, in 1911. Jessup was working on the Olympics during its 5th voyage in September of that year, when a collision occurred with the HMS Hawke near the Isle of Wight in southern England. The investigation later revealed that the Olympic's massive size had created a strong suction that pulled the Hawke into the ship, causing the accident. Violet Jessup joined the crew of the Titanic just in time for its first voyage in April 1912. The ship, considered unsinkable, set sail from Southampton bound for New York City. Jessup would later write about the tragic events of April 14th and 15 when the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank, resulting in the loss of over 1,500 lives. Jessup helped other passengers, especially women and children, board lifeboats before boarding one herself. When World War I began, the Britannic was converted into a hospital ship. Violet Jessup, who had become a nurse with the British Red Cross, was serving on the Britannic in November 1916. While sailing through the Aegean Sea, the ship hit a mine laid by a German submarine. The explosion caused a lot of damage, and the Britannic sank within an hour. When the effect of the explosion settled, it was reported that only 30 people lost their lives, and over 1,000 others were rescued, including Jessup, who had miraculously escaped death once again. Jessup continued her career at sea after the war, working on cruise ships for another 42 years before retiring. She eventually lost her life in 1971. Number 13. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. In 1775, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams met in Philadelphia as members of the Continental Congress. They quickly became close friends, working together on important tasks like writing the Declaration of Independence. They also spent time together in Europe, representing the young United States as diplomats. However, their friendship suffered when Jefferson became president in 1801, succeeding Adams. Jefferson was a Republican, while Adams was a Federalist, so their political differences drove them apart. Between 1801 and 1811, they didn't speak to each other. Finally, in 1812, Adams reached out to Jefferson with a friendly New Year's message, marking the beginning of a renewed friendship. This led to them exchanging letters that continued for nearly 15 years. On July 4, 1826, the United States celebrated 50 years of independence from Great Britain. On that very same day, Thomas Jefferson, one of the country's founding fathers, passed away at his home, Monticello, in Virginia. He was 83 years old. Meanwhile, in Massachusetts, John Adams, another founding father and Jefferson's old friend, lay on his own deathbed, unaware of Jefferson's death. With his final breath, the 90-year-old Adams' last words were that Thomas Jefferson would survive. Unfortunately, he was mistaken. Jefferson had actually passed away just hours earlier. In an unexpected twist of fate, history repeated itself in 1831 when James Monroe, the 5th President of the United States, passed away on July 4th, exactly 5 years after Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. This made Monroe the third of the first 5 U.S. presidents to die on Independence Day, a coincidence that has been noted by historians and scholars. 4 years later, in 1836, James Madison, a close friend and fellow Virginian of Jefferson's, neared his last days. Madison, who had succeeded Jefferson as president, refused treatment that could have prolonged his life until July 4th, choosing instead to accept his impending death. He passed away on June 28, 1836, just a few days shy of the anniversary of independence. Number 11. The Civil War at Wilmer McLean's vicinity. In the summer of 1861, Wilmer McLean and his family were living on his wife's plantation near Manassas Junction, Virginia, when the American Civil War broke out. As Union forces approached, the Confederate Army, led by General P.G.T. Beauregard, took over the McLean farm as their headquarters. On July 21, 1861, the first major battle of the Civil War took place on the McLean property, along a small stream called Bull Run, between Confederate and Union troops. The McLean farm saw another major battle in August 1862, known as the Second Battle of Bull Run. After 2 years of conflict, the McLean family left their plantation in 1863 and moved to a small village called Appomattox Courthouse, about 120 miles southwest of Manassas Junction. Wilmer McLean, a sugar supplier for the Confederate Army, was living in Appomattox when the war was coming to an end. On April 9, 1865, Colonel Charles Marshall, a Confederate officer, asked McLean for help finding a place for General Robert E. Lee to meet with Union General Ulysses S. Grant. McLean's home was chosen, and that afternoon, Lee surrendered his army to Grant in McLean's parlor. The Union soldiers were so excited about the historic moment that they took pieces of the parlor as souvenirs. A year later, McLean decided to sell his house, known as the Surrender House, and move back to Manassas. However, he couldn't find a buyer and ended up defaulting on the property. It was sold at a public auction in 1869. Today, the McLean home is operated by the National Park Service and has been open to the public since 1949. It has been preserved to look like it did on that famous day in 1865, and visitors can tour the parlor where Lee surrendered and ended the Civil War. Number 10. John Wilkes Booth's brother and Abraham Lincoln's son. Before the tragic assassination of President Abraham Lincoln in 1865, there was a surprising connection between his family and John Wilkes Booth's family. The thing is, Booth's brother, Edwin, was a well-known actor who strongly supported the Union during the Civil War. One day, while waiting at a train station in New Jersey, Robert Todd Lincoln, the president's son, accidentally leaned against a stationary train and nearly fell onto the tracks, as it began to move. Edwin Booth quickly reacted and grabbed Robert by the collar, saving him from potential harm. Years later, Robert Lincoln wrote about the incident, but Edwin Booth didn't know the identity of the person he had saved until much later. That's not the only coincidence involving these men. Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's son, had a unique and tragic experience. He was connected to the deaths of 3 American presidents, a circumstance that is hard to imagine. Although he wasn't in the theater when his father was assassinated, he was by his side as he took his last breaths. Robert Todd Lincoln also saw President James A. Garfield's assassination with his own eyes. In 1901, he was a guest of President William McKinley in Buffalo, New York, when the president was shot and killed. After witnessing such tragedies, Robert Todd Lincoln lived a long life, working as a lawyer, diplomat, and businessman, until he died in 1926. Number 9. Margot Robbie, Emma Mackey, and Jaime Pressly's uncanny resemblance.
I've been getting told for years that I look like the girl from Sex Education, who is Emma Mackey.
Celebrity doppelgangers are a very popular topic among both fans of pop culture and industry insiders in Hollywood. Margot Robbie and the 2 women that share her facial features are a perfect example. Margot Robbie revealed in a BuzzFeed interview with co-actor Ryan Gosling that Emma Mackey was cast as a Barbie in the hit movie because of their striking resemblance. Robbie and the film's director, Greta Gerwig, thought it would be humorous to play on their similar looks, with Mackey playing the role of a Barbie version of Margot Robbie. However, once they finalized their hair colors for the movie with Mackey as a dark brunette and Robbie as a classic blonde Barbie, the resemblance became less noticeable, and the joke was ultimately abandoned.
We were going to do like this whole joke about us looking similar and how... Did you know this?
I did not know this.
Anyways, and then once we got all dressed up as our Barbies, we were kind of like, we don't actually look that similar.
Emma Mackey isn't the only one Margot Robbie shares a coincidental resemblance with. She also strangely looks like Emmy Award-winning actress Jaime Pressly. Jaime has frequently been compared to Margot Robbie because they share very similar facial features and blonde hair. With that said, who do you think looks more like Margot Robbie, Emma or Jaime? Number 8. Mark Twain's birth and death perfectly coincide with Halley's Comet. Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, was born in 1835. Coincidentally, Halley's Comet was also a major highlight of that year. This comet is known for its rare visits to Earth, and its next appearance wasn't until 1910. Interestingly, 1910 was also the year that Mark Twain passed away. According to the New York Times, Twain had actually predicted that his life would coincide with the comet's appearance, saying that they came into the world together and would leave together. While no one knows for sure if he really predicted it, do you believe his claim? Number 7. A real-life tragedy, predicted in an Edgar Allan Poe novel. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, which tells the story of a ship's crew facing a dire situation. Their boat is severely damaged, leaving them with limited options for survival. The crew got so desperate to survive that they resorted to drawing straws to determine who would become the next source of food to sustain the others. Unfortunately, a character named Richard Parker is selected and killed, and his body is eaten by the remaining crew members. After this gruesome event, 2 crew members ultimately survive and are rescued, thanks to Richard Parker's body and a tortoise they ate. Now here's where things get more interesting. A few decades after Edgar Allan Poe wrote his novel, a real-life yacht called the Mignonette sank in a storm in the Indian Ocean. The 4 crew members managed to escape in a small dinghy, but they didn't have time to gather much food or water. As they struggled to survive, they ate a tortoise, just like the characters in Poe's story. In a shocking and disturbing turn of events, the crew is forced to resort to cannibalism to stay alive, just like in the novel. Unfortunately, one of the young crew members, named Richard Parker, was the one chosen to be eaten. The fact that the victim shared the same name as the character in Poe's novel makes the already disturbing story very unsettling. Number 6. The Erdington Murders. In 1817, a young woman named Mary Ashford was found dead in Erdington, a suburb of Birmingham, England. She had been out with a man named Abraham Thornton the night before, and he became the main suspect. Sadly, because the case lacked any evidence and a strong alibi, he was found not guilty, and Mary Ashford's murder case remained unsolved. Fast forward to 1974, and a shockingly similar crime occurred in the same area. Another 20-year-old woman went missing and was found dead on Whit Monday, a Christian holiday. The last person to see her alive was a man named Michael Ian Thornton, who shared the same last name as the suspect from the earlier crime. Just like in the 1817 case, Michael Ian Thornton was found not guilty despite being the last person to see the victim alive. The strange similarities between the two crimes, including the age of the victims, the location, and the shared last name of the suspects, have left many wondering about the coincidence and if there is a connection between the two cases. Number 5. Coincidental conditions the solar eclipses require.
Ready for an eclipse? 4, 3, here we go! 1.
Look at that. Fantastic. Oh my God.
Even our solar system has its own strange coincidences, and the top one is the total solar eclipse. This rare event has been interpreted to be a bad omen in history. The moon and sun have a peculiar relationship, with the moon being about 3,174 kilometers in diameter, and the sun's diameter being 1,400,000 kilometers, roughly 400 times larger. However, the moon is positioned about 384,403 kilometers away from Earth, while the sun is about 150 million kilometers away, which is also roughly 400 times farther. This strange coincidence in outer space means that from our perspective on Earth, the moon and sun appear to be approximately the same size in the sky. Isaac Asimov called this the most unlikely coincidence imaginable. According to Live Science, if the sun were any larger or the moon were any farther away, we would probably never witness a total solar eclipse, as the moon would not appear wide enough to block our view of the sun. The moon is gradually moving away from Earth, a process that's happening at a rate similar to how fast our fingernails grow, according to astronomer Mark Galloway. This means that, in the future, the moon won't appear large enough in the sky to completely block the sun's light, and total solar eclipses will no longer occur. In the distant past, when dinosaurs roamed the Earth, the moon was closer to our planet and would have appeared larger in the sky. This would have likely eliminated the brief, sparkling diamond ring effect that we sometimes see during eclipses today, known as Bailey's beads. Number 4. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived both Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing an estimated 100,000 people and leaving many more injured. This has been a core part of history for decades, and one man made it into the history books. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was getting ready to leave Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, after a 3-month work trip. As a naval engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, he had been working tirelessly with his colleagues on a new oil tanker design. With his task finally complete, he was eager to return home to his family, including his wife, Hisako, and their young son, Katsutoshi. However, fate had other plans, and Yamaguchi had no idea his last day in Hiroshima would become a day to be remembered in history. As he prepared to leave, the atomic bomb was dropped on the city. Yamaguchi's plans for a reunion with his family were put on hold as he struggled to survive the devastating blast. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was very fortunate to have survived the atomic bomb blast in Hiroshima. He quickly fled the city in search of safety, but fate led him to Nagasaki, where he witnessed a second devastating explosion. This time, he suffered severe burns from radioactive ash, which covered over half of his body. Yamaguchi was the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both bombings. Years after his incredible luck in surviving the bombings, Yamaguchi ultimately lost his life to cancer in 2010. He was one of approximately 260,000 people who survived the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Number 3. President Vladimir Putin's look-alike. While President Vladimir Putin was recently denying claims that he attempted to execute any strategy to spread his political influence in Africa, some interesting pictures were circulating online. These pictures show people who strangely resemble Putin. One of these images has gained some attention on TikTok, featuring an African man who bears the most striking resemblance to Putin. Many people are amazed by the likeness, with some even joking that the African man looks more like Putin than Putin himself. These look-alike images have sparked discussions and debates on other social media platforms besides TikTok, while some are simply enjoying the humor of the coincidental resemblance. Others are using the opportunity to show the diversity of human appearance and the fact that people from different parts of the world can share similar facial features. What do you think about the picture? Number 2. The German ship and British ocean liner. When World War I started, navies from both sides of the conflict took control of private transatlantic liners. Germany, for instance, seized the Cap Trafalgar and repainted it to resemble British merchant ships, like the HMS Carmania, by giving it a red and black color scheme. The goal was to create a disguise that would help the ship avoid detection or even gain an advantage in combat. This tactic was meant to confuse enemy ships and potentially give the converted liner an upper hand in battle. By mimicking the appearance of a British vessel, the Cap Trafalgar might be able to sneak past enemy ships undetected or even lure them into a trap. On September 14, 1914, a battle took place between two ships, the Cap Trafalgar and the Carmania. The Cap Trafalgar, which had been commandeered by Germany, was disguised to look like the Carmania, but the British ship had since been repainted gray, making the disguise less effective. The two ships still engaged in a fierce battle, making it the first time ocean liners had ever clashed. The battle resulted in the sinking of the Cap Trafalgar, a victory for the British forces. What's interesting is that some accounts claim that the Carmania was disguised as the Cap Trafalgar during the battle, but this is untrue. Number 1. Johannes Kepler's decoding of Galileo's message. When Galileo Galilei used his telescope to observe Saturn, he was confused by what he saw. The rings around Saturn looked like two vague, shapeless masses beside the planet. Galileo was excited about his discovery, but he was cautious about sharing it with others. He wrote to his friends and colleagues in code, using an anagram to conceal his findings. The anagram can be rearranged to reveal a message claiming he had observed that the highest planet is threefold. At the time, Saturn was considered the highest planet because it was the farthest one known from Earth, so Galileo's discovery was about to add to that known fact about the planet. Johannes Kepler, a German astronomer, received a coded letter from Galileo Galilei. Kepler deciphered the message, but his interpretation was incorrect. He thought the message read, "Be greeted, double knob, children of Mars," leading him to believe that Galileo was announcing the discovery of two moons orbiting Mars. No one knew Kepler's incorrect interpretation would turn out to be a prediction, as Mars truly has two moons, Phobos and Deimos, which were discovered much later. Kepler's mistake was a shocking coincidence, as Galileo's original message was actually about Saturn's rings, not Mars' moons. Today we recognize Phobos and Deimos as the two small moons orbiting Mars, a discovery that would have been unimaginable in Galileo and Kepler's time. That's not all. In the early 18th century, Jonathan Swift wrote a famous book called Gulliver's Travels. In it, he used humor and irony to criticize the scientific research of his time, which he believed often prioritized abstract knowledge over practical applications. To better explain this point, Swift created a fictional scenario where a group of scholars, the Laputans, discovered two small satellites orbiting the planet Mars. Swift's description of the Laputans' discovery was likely meant to poke fun at the scientific community. But coincidentally, his fictional account predicted the actual discovery of Martian moons, which would not be made until centuries later. Which of these strange coincidences shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next updates. Also, click the next video on your screen to enjoy more exciting content.